el sistema del consumo, nuestra sociedad moderna, mantiene a la gente consumiendo cosas que no les convienen. La gran parte de lo que hoy en día se compra son porquerías que no se necesitan. Es increíble. Es otra forma de esclavitud. Crear necesidades en la mente que realmente no tiene ninguna importancia.
He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today. Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it.
He said, we're losing half of our market because men have invoked a taboo against women smoking in public. And then I said, have I your permission to see a psychoanalyst to find out what cigarettes mean to women? So I called up Dr. Brill.
A. Brill was one of the first psychoanalysts in America. And for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises. Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, and from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic ad.
The idea that smoking actually made women freer was completely irrational, but it made them feel more independent. It meant that irrelevant objects could become powerful emotional symbols of how you wanted to be seen by others.
Eddie Bernays saw the way to sell product was not to sell it to your intellect, that you ought to buy an automobile, but that you will feel better about it if you have this automobile. I think he originated that idea, that they weren't just purchasing something, but they were engaging themselves emotionally or personally in the product or service. That it's not, you think you need a new piece of clothing, but you'll feel better with the piece of clothing. That was his contribution in a very real sense. We see it all over the place today, but I think he originated the idea of the emotional connect to a product or service.
Lo que las corporaciones hicieron fue transformar la manera de pensar de los americanos y después de todo el mundo acerca de los productos. Tenían claro lo que era necesario hacer. Uno de los más grandes inversionistas de Wall Street escribió: tenemos que elevar a América de un nivel de necesidad a un nivel de deseo. La gente debe ser entrenada para desear nuevas cosas, incluso antes que las viejas se estropeen. Debemos crear una nueva mentalidad en América. Los deseos deben superar las necesidades.
Es increíble realmente que uno vea cómo esta sociedad mantiene la juventud en ignorancia y ningún valor superior se promueve con ganas. Pero por todos lados hay promoción de alcohol y cigarros y de casinos para que la gente pueda pensar de que el placer material es fácil de obtener, cuando en realidad el placer material ni siquiera hace feliz. El dinero no hace feliz. La salud no se puede comprar, la alegría no se puede comprar, el amor no se puede comprar. Todo lo importante, esencial de la vida no se puede comprar.
And so that there's this real openness to Bernays' techniques being used to sell products to the masses.
Beginning in the early 20s, the New York banks funded the creation of chains of department stores across America. They were to be the outlets for the mass-produced goods, and Bernays' job was to produce the new type of customer. Bernays began to create many of the techniques of mass consumer persuasion that we now live with. He was employed by William Randolph Hearst to promote his new women's magazines, and Bernays glamorized them by placing articles and advertisements that linked products made by others of his clients to famous film stars like Clara Bow, who was also his client. Bernays also began the practice of product placement in the movies, and he dressed the stars at the film's premieres with clothes and jewellery from other firms he represented. He was, he claimed, the first person to tell car companies they could sell cars as symbols of male sexuality. He employed psychologists to issue reports that said products were good for you, and then pretended they were independent studies. He organised fashion shows in the department stores and paid celebrities to repeat the new and essential message: you bought things not just for need, but to express your inner sense of yourself to others.
Yeah, the effect is, as we spoke before, you're being told something, and this, what you are being told, this initiates a process within you. This initiates a process in sense of desires, in sense of fears, in sense of some ideals. And based upon this, again, we are acting. So in this way, we can be really manipulated, we can be forced to do something which we would ourselves we would never do. All this is considered psychology. You see, the human being consists of this gross body. I mean, this is the body, the visible part of us. But there is also the subtle body. It means what we call the psyche, or what is called the mind. So it means if you implant something in the mind, some ideal, some desire, then the body will act according to this desire.
Significa también la libertad de la agresión, de las publicidades, de la cine, de la televisión agresiva, de las matanzas o de los pecados pasivos que uno las tiene cuando uno contempla en la televisión películas de violencia, de abuso de mujeres, codicia, intoxicación. Usted ve en todas las películas el héroe fumando. Entonces la gente después que salen y se compra un paquete de esto también, donde dice el producto esto te va a matar. Y si quiere tener libertad económica, entonces gaste menos, gaste solo lo que realmente necesites y no sea un esclavo. Tengo que vestir la ropa de marca o cosas tan tontos que es completamente ilusiones infundidos en la publicidad en uno, y que le hace a uno cada vez más chiflado y cada vez más egoísta y sintiéndose mejor que los demás que no tienen la ropa de marca, que no tienen el carro fino. Y así, de esta manera, la libertad es realmente algo que uno tiene que ganárselo con austeridad y con entusiasmo y con una predisposición de eliminar las mentiras de la sociedad, eliminar las mentiras de su vida. En otras palabras, uno se vuelve un ignorante, se vuelve un esclavo, un manipulado. Uno se vuelve una persona de libertad, no sabe nada. Si tú quieres ser libre en términos políticos, pues entonces voto solamente por aquellos que realmente defienden la madre naturaleza, que realmente luchen en la acción. Y si usted no ve a nadie que lo hace, hágalo tú. Sea tú la persona que promueve lo que es libertad para nuestro planeta. Libertad de la codicia, libertad de la envidia, libertad del abuso, libertad de las cantidades de mentiras que nos han echado en los últimos años del crecimiento del materialismo, consumismo, capitalismo despiadado.
Nuestra democracia ha sufrido un cambio y se llama consumismo. El principal deber de un individuo ya no es el de ser ciudadano, sino el de consumir.
Nos hemos convertido en una nación de consumidores. Nuestra identidad primaria es la de consumidor. No somos madres, profesores o granjeros, sino consumidores. Nuestro valor se mide y se demuestra, principalmente por cuánto consumimos. Y sí que lo hacemos. Compramos, compramos y compramos.
You know that I think that young people today don't have any future. I think everybody in the world now can feel, can feel the power of these large multinational corporations who are really starting to rule the world. These large multinational corporations spending $400 billion a year trying to sell us fast food and trying to sell us cars, then of course that has a huge impact on us. The 30-second television spot is, I think, the most powerful piece of communication that human beings have ever come up with. You are sitting there in your chair, passive, nothing to say, and outside there's some smart people who are producing fantastic television shows and commercials. They are the powerful producers of information and producers of meaning. And you are a passive consumer of that meaning. And that meaning isn't even good meaning, it's mostly propaganda for consumer culture. And then you think that happiness means to buy more and more, and at Christmas time especially, let's go out into the malls, let's go out into the malls, let's go out into the malls and really buy stuff, you know.
There's more and more signs everywhere that the life of consumerism is really not a satisfying life. We're trying to encourage the questioning, just the questioning. Why do people go out there and try to protest or try to, do something? That isn't mindless violence. The mindlessness is sitting there doing dope, watching MTV, and then you go and get a job and you just schlep along. To me, that's violent.
Así que en los Estados Unidos tenemos más cosas que nunca, pero las encuestas muestran que nuestra felicidad nacional se está disminuyendo. Nuestra felicidad nacional llegó a su punto más alto en algún momento de los 50, al mismo tiempo que esta manía de consumo explotó. Una coincidencia interesante. Creo que sé por qué. Tenemos más cosas, pero menos tiempo para lo que realmente nos hace feliz. La familia, los amigos, el ocio. Estamos trabajando más duro que nunca. Algunos analistas dicen que tenemos menos tiempo de ocio ahora que en época desde la sociedad feudal. ¿Y sabes cuáles son las dos actividades principales que hacemos durante el poco tiempo de ocio que tenemos? Mirar tele e ir de compras. En los Estados Unidos pasamos 3 a 4 veces más horas de compras que nuestros pares en Europa. Así que estamos en esta situación ridícula donde vamos al trabajo, tal vez 2, llegamos a casa y estamos exhaustos. Así que nos sentamos en nuestro nuevo sofá y vemos tele. Y las publicidades nos dicen, sos una mierda. Así que tenemos que ir a comprar algo para sentirnos mejor y después tenemos que ir más al trabajo para pagar lo que compramos. Llegamos a casa y estamos más cansados. Así que te sentás a mirar la tele y te dice que salgas otra vez de compras. Y así estamos en una rutina loca y sin fin de trabajar, mirar, gastar y podríamos simplemente parar.
Aquí hay de cambiar la conciencia.